Yeah, I guess this is a very simple question. But I was wondering to what extent we can try to think this process of patenting culture not simply as sort of falling into the effects of neoliberal policies where you try to patent culture just for economic reasons, but there's actually a larger critique that and a larger effort in that process to say, well, we don't want the reproduction of neo-colonial ideologies. So we want to...
We want to own them?
Yeah, we want to own them. We want to... this is what identifies us. And there's, in many parts of Latin America, you have this sort of fear of colonialism. We have this as history of colonialism. And so I wonder how this can be more complicated by seeing these efforts to patent culture as a larger critique to neoliberal efforts to gain control over the culture.
This is a really interesting question, and when I've talked with other people and presented some of this work to a writers group, they bring up a kind of similar issue, and I think it comes to that, can this patenting of patrimony work in a kind of cultural rights way that's like contestatory to? And I don't know. I mean, this is where I think we're sort of in between it now in the paper and thinking about it and the work we're doing, because in the examples we have so far, particularly the ones that might be at the very local levels, you would think that a kind of cultural rights approach of patenting your culture wouldn't be necessarily fighting with your neighbors over it, which was definitely something that came up at the workshop. And so it's something that we're, I don't have the answer for you, but I think it's a really important question to ask, and it could very well be that something different is possible, and maybe somewhere it is happening in Bolivia. But I don't think that the reaction... well, I think I'll leave it there for now. I mean, I think this is a really important question, and we haven't really come to our conclusion about that, and we might not. But I do think that it could be something alternative. So far, I don't see it as alternative, but it could be.
One additional comment about what you said, and this is just a hypothesis. Probably the discussion about the property of La Diablada Peru versus Chile overlaps other issues that have to do with territory. There's a lot of tension.
Definitely, yeah.
So that
Definitely
might not
Chile.
have nothing to do with the Diablada itself.
Yes.
But it would be interesting if you can.
But, I'm sorry, what?
It might not be, it's probably not directly related to the Diablada. The Diablada is just a symptom of an underlying
Right.
tension
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
this.
Because after all, Peru, Chile, they lost territory,
To Peru, to
Pacific and Peru, and there's definitely tensions around borders.
No, my question is it possible to patent a heritage or to stake a claim in the intangible futures, cultural production, so on, without falling into the neoliberal trap? Can it be done?
Can it be done?
Can it be done?
Yeah.
I don't think so, but
No.
but our point isn't actually about people actually doing it, but that they are thinking about it in those terms.
Yeah.
And using that language.
Commodified, using the language, which contradicts what Evo Morales is saying all the time.
But what you're saying, when it's convenient,
Yeah,
then
well,
it's against it,
yeah,
but
I
it's has to do
understand
with
that.
the seats.
I understand
But
that.
when it's,
Not convenient, then it's against it.
And I don't know if it's necessarily convenience. I mean, it's just, I think that there's a very strong sort of cultural nationalism, and there isn't necessarily a kind of, I'm not seeing a big break in the cultural nationalism between indigenismo pre-Evo Morales and the present.
Yes, I guess my question is also related to
I'm sorry,
what.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
So I guess my question is also related a little bit with what Elba was saying before. If the main, I mean, what I take to be the main, one of the main arguments of your presentation is this continuity that you're seeing on how this like problem is deployed, this state deploying or performing indigeneity that re-articulates a neoliberal agenda, that it was actually, it came to power on the basis of an anti-neoliberal political platform. So I saw the continuities, but I'm wondering if you found these continuities, like spaces of more open contestation, or even in the way that they were deploying or performing indigeneity. Or if it was just continuity.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's continuity at the level of the state. But I think at the local level, there's a lot of different things going on. And that's, what we're trying to show with some of the ethnographic examples. I mean, the workshop, obviously, we were trying to get people around the table who were coming from very different perspectives. So we had this, entrepreneur guy who wanted to patent his empanadas. With pico,
I still miss them. With helado de canela.
That somebody else wants to patent too. The helado de canela.
Perfect.
So we were, in that particular context, we were sort of trying to think about people who would be willing to engage in different kinds of ideas, alternative ideas. So like Julieta Paredes was there. And she, took a very sort of strong position against any kind of heritage, says it's very patriarchal, coming from patrimonio, patriarchy, and other people who took kind of more radical positions. And then there were some people who were from the lowlands, from Santa Cruz area. A lot of the people coming from there were very interested in, a lot more interested in sort of the questions of how to preserve their culture. And very concerned about sort of monies being put towards research to help them document, and those tended to be their concerns. There's a lot more other complex things to talk about in terms of what went on in the workshop. The other things I would mention is that in the last year as well, one of the workshop participants who does theater in El Alto was a main organizer in the first, Congreso de Cultura Comunitaria, Cultura Viva Cultura Viva Participaria. I think that was the title of it. So there are people who are thinking about culture in ways that I think they do want to sort of move outside of a kind of way that it's always thought about in terms of tourism. And there are a lot of people in organizations in Bolivia who are pushing forward these kinds of discussions. So I do think that at this level, outside of the state, that there's a lot going on. And then there's the free culture discourse. I mean, they had Richard Stallman there from Free Software last spring, our spring, not their spring. So there, and like I said, they have a Facebook free culture group, but I think that's accessible to a limited sphere of people. Juan Carlos Cordero is actually one of the people who spoke to me about these issues and sort of motivated me and motivated Henry to start organizing, thinking about doing something, a project like this one. And he used to work for Sobodecom, which is the Royalty Collection Society in Bolivia, and used to be the person who'd knock on the door, you gotta pay for using that music. And they're some of the issues that have come up recently, like they wanted to charge the people in Gran Poder for the music of Gran Poder. Gran Poder is like carnival, but it's a different time, different fiesta. It's in La Paz. They wanted this Royalty Collection Society wanted to charge the dancers for the use of music in this collective fiesta that thousands of dancers and basically they came to some agreement behind doors, but Juan Carlos Cordero also talked about that issue with me, and he became very active. He moved out of Sobodecom and came to see Sobodecom as as very problematic, that that the whole sort of royalty collection society seemed to be working to the disadvantage of musicians in Bolivia. And he became very active in a group called Copy South, which is a group that has been set up by Alan Story, and they have meetings, and they've had meetings in India and Brazil, and they talk about how intellectual property laws are set up to the advantage of the North and disadvantage of the Global South. So he was one of the sort of key people who was talking to me and to Henry, and it sort of got us motivated to get involved in this project. And he obviously takes one of the most radical positions in the workshop in relationship to these issues. So I think that there's a lot of different positions going on, and the ones at the level of the state, I think, still get caught up in kind of a nationalism that just kind of comes with the territory of the state. Does that answer a little bit?
Yeah, I was wondering why, if we have this transformation, like for the first time, seeing this huge movement achieving power, why it hasn't translated? Is it just because of the bureaucratic machine that you mentioned? It gets encoded into this nationalism that is part of the state. But why doesn't it translate if you're finding all these voices already? What makes it impossible for it to have some kind of institutional, more broader transformation? Why did it happen in the case of the seeds that one might even think it was even more complicated? I don't know. And it's not happening on intangible.
Because there are two different entities. I think there are two different things. One is tangible, and one is intangible. And I think that's why. That's why it's so
what
difficult.
makes it, I
But the
mean,
knowledge of the seeds is also
yeah.
intangible.
I mean, what
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. What makes it from the state so hermetic to these alternative views?
I don't know the answer. It's a great question. Yeah. It's
Oh.
sort of at the center of this project, and we haven't come to the big concluding answer, but it's a really good question.
One thing, just thinking from the top of my head, this is the first time when people in Bolivia started to question their positions in terms of an understanding of identity, national identity, cultural identity. There was no room for conversation before this political change. And that overlaps also some of the larger indigenous movement in the South and the ownership of the land, and are different economic issues. But in terms of identity itself, I think there is a huge challenge. Plus, because even the national identity was sort of weak through the time, even since the Republic, because Bolivia was always fragmented because of these different cultures. So there was on one hand a push to try to create this national identity that unifies this diversity. And now,
Which was really back in '52.
yes, exactly.
And that's exactly when you have folklore music, indigenous music, that before people in La Paz would have said, "Ay, esa es cosa de indios," and wouldn't want to have anything to do
And they
with it.
wouldn't
But all of a
dance.
sudden, it becomes national music.
Yeah.
But that's '52.
But
Mm.
the movement, for example, to dance to everybody, not only indigenous people, because all these popular dances were only part of the community folklore and the prestes, like probably 20, 30 years ago.
Mm.
And nowadays, everybody dances. Plus, even upper class
Yes.
people are very engaged, and there's a lot of money going on in the kinds of customs and da-da-da, but it shifted completely. And that's more attached to a national identity, more than the cultural heritage component.
I don't know if I can add something to that. I think it is important to look very closely at the fact that indigeneity moved from being like in the shadows, sort of moved from a position of second place to be in the center. And so what that it means in terms of your identity, in terms of your culture, but also the pride that comes with the fact that now this idea of indigeneity moved to the center of the discussion of the political discussion, and also from to the center of the nationalist discussion. So I think that process in itself needs to be acknowledged, and perhaps that will give you, I don't know, a different conclusion.
Right, and that,
this is just an idea.
no, that's really important, and also sort of the pride on the part of indigenous people that your identity is being central, and also the feelings of mestizos, you know, in that particular moment when it's not necessarily, you know. So what does that mean, you know, and those different sort of positionings of identity? You know? Very important.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I get your names, those of you who gave me questions, comments? Let's see, I know you, your name?
Elba Orozco.
Elba
Orozco.